Ready to rock and roll.
Ready to rock and roll. How close should we sit? I feel weird being on a bench. Because I'm sort of...
Why?
I don't know.
This is really good intro for everyone.
This is very intimate. We've got North blood running through our veins.
We do. Happy game week, everyone. For those who don't know, this is Dylan Alexander, draft expert, recently joined True Footy.
Yeah, that's probably something we'll have to...
We'll save that for another video. We'll unpack that in another video. And also a Mad North fan. Would you say Mad North fan?
Yes. I think... Do you want me to do the spiel about my North Melbourne?
Yeah, give the people your honest stance on North Melbourne heading into 2025.
So, okay, like I'm a little bit more of a pessimistic fan. So I moved overseas at some point and I was watching North from afar. And I think that's kind of affected the way that I am a mad North fan. Like I care that we do well. But when I was over there, I probably just didn't watch this as much. And I kind of had a distance. And that's probably come back into the way that I watch them. And I think I'm maybe a bit more impartial with the way that I see North Melbourne coming into 2025, which has led me in videos to be a bit more maybe pessimistic.
So our first game is this Saturday night against the Bulldogs. How do you realistically think we will fare?
I'm concerned. Throughout the... Are you concerned, Marty?
No, I'm never concerned.
I worry. The one thing that I see with North, I worry a little bit about our... we've got that midfield that we've sort of cultivated over the last few years. We've gone to the draft heavily. We've taken these really high-end, talented players. But I feel like we've neglected different parts of our squad. So I watched us play Melbourne in the preseason game. The key position defenders still look a little bit lost to me, where you've got Comden, you've got Core, you've got Griffin Logue. I worry about the balance of that defence. Who's locking down on the opposition's best forwards? You're going to be dealing with a player like Sam Darcy for the Western Bulldogs.
He's quite scary, I will say.
Extremely scary. You really only need a couple of nice deep entries. He's going to clunk marks. Like, who plays on him for the North Melbourne defence? I mean, that's probably an unfair one because who plays on him for any team?
Anyway, yeah, he's a monster.
Yeah, but we've got a weird balance. Like, Comben is really good at intercepting. He's not that great at locking down defensively one-on-one. You kind of need that from Griffin Logue and Core, but both of them are a little bit undersized. So I worry about that, and I worry also majorly about our ball movement coming off the half back. I think since we've moved Harry Sheasel into the midfield, into the forward half of the ground, it's kind of been a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation. Caleb Daniel comes back there, but players like McDonald off the half back, I struggle a little bit with him with his ball use. And the other one is Tucker off a wing. I think when he gets the ball, in really advantageous situations for us, he can be a little bit sloppy with the ball.
I think those concerns are really shared by a lot of North fans. I did my starting team for round one over the weekend, and who I think will play in round one is probably not what I would personally go for. I really like both Tucker and McDonald. I think there are elements of their game that are really advantageous for us. I think both of them are really good, like 1% players. I think Luke McDonald's pressure has been really, really good. I feel like I can notice a shift in him since stepping down as co-captain. I feel like there's less pressure on him. I feel like he can just sort of relax a little bit more and enjoy himself a little bit more. I think Darcy Tucker's sort of follow-up efforts, second, third efforts, his pressure's really good as well, but I think both of them, maybe their skill lets us down from time to time. So I think it's going to be a really interesting evolution of North Melbourne over the next 24 weeks and how the side shapes. I would really like us to get to a point where one of those players aren't there by the end of the year. And there's no disrespect to them, but it's just us evolving constantly as a team and getting closer to that side that will take us to that fifth premiership.
Yeah. And you can definitely see under Clarkson that he has a style, a way that he wants to play. He wants to play that pretty high uncontested game, moving the ball, like, cultured halfbacks that can kind of hit targets in the middle of the ground. And I think that will happen. I guess the conversation when it comes to McDonald is, do you go with a player like that you said, because he does have that a bit more defensive stability. He's got those second efforts, or then you've got someone like a Zach Fisher, who's probably not as good without the ball, but a little bit better on the ball.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, one of the guys who potentially will move into that backline on the weekend for the first time is Finn O'Sullivan. You watched him very closely heading into the draft of 2024. What do you think we can expect from Finn O'Sullivan, not just if he debuts on the weekend, but in our side over 2024? 2025.
Yeah, I
Oh
know.
my God.
It's hard to make that adjustment, right?
Seriously.
Finn O'Sullivan, to me, in 2024 was the best player in the draft. The best all-round midfielder. There was, like, Sam Lawler was taken above him, a really big, powerful midfielder, like a bit more forward of centre. But as a just all-round midfielder, Finn O'Sullivan has, like, there's nothing that he's bad at. You look at, like, the players that everyone's talking about in this preseason, Jagger Smith, Levi Ashcroft, they're kind of slow burn midfielders. They don't necessarily hurt you as much as Finn O'Sullivan can. The way that he's got that little bit of bite to him, so he's got really good pace off the mark. He can get out of stoppage, and that's like the long-term trajectory of him. But his agility is so good, and I think you mentioned that he may be going into that halfback position. Like, I think that would be perfect for his development because it'll just get the ball in his hands a little bit more. He can use that agility, that step, and sort of move out of traffic, and he can actually hit targets. We've seen it through the preseason playing off the wing. When he gets a little bit of space, he can really move around players, open up the game, and it's almost like I see a lot of similarities to the way that he plays and Colby McKercher as well. Both different footed players, but there's a similarity to the way they move. So moving Colby McKercher from halfback into the front half of the ground and then replacing him with Finn O'Sullivan, I think is perfect.
Because I was sort of the belief before the West Coast game, the whole time since we drafted Foss, he was going to be either playing on the wing and giving us run on the outside or going into the middle. He's so versatile, he can do both. But then watching him in the second half against West Coast, how comfortable he looked off that half back line. He was really, really strong. He was really courageous going back with the fly to the ball. He gave us that really clean execution out of our defensive 50, which is a massive gap for us. So I really feel like it's kind of the obvious move for him for now. We've done it with Shees in 23, Kirch in 24, and now it looks like Finn O'Sullivan will be the next one to do it in 25.
I love how Clarko as well, he seems to, like, with all of those players, he starts them like Sheasel. He started him in preseason forward of the ball, and then like round one comes around and he flicks him into defence.
Loves to keep us on our toes, Clarko.
Yeah. He did exactly the same with McKercher. It was like wing, 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 and then now we're going to move him into the halfback position. I think he's doing exactly the same with Finn O'Sullivan. And for what it's always hard to put pressure on these guys like a Finn O'Sullivan to come in and have a big impact, but just with the skill set that he has, I think he can. And we talked about it there with like McDonald and Caleb Daniel. He's going to give so much more help and just like that extra bit of class. I'm really excited for what he can do. Every time he goes onto a football field, I'm excited when he gets the ball.
Excited is the key word of Kanga TV.
I get excited about draftees.
Okay, great.
Particularly new players. Love it.
Let's just move on from Finn O'Sullivan for now because I kind of wanted to talk to you as well about the other three guys we brought through the draft last year. Don't know if and when any of them will play this season, but I'd love just a little bit of insight into Whitlock, Urquhart and Stevens and how they may be able to secure a spot in our best 23 in the years to come at North.
Yeah, so we'll start, I guess Matt Whitlock's the next one as far as draft order, right? I think like North swinging that big move on draft night was definitely a move to kind of show that we're looking to the now, right?
What did you think of that move?
At the time, I was a little bit scathing of it. I do get what they were trying to do. They were basically saying, we don't care about the future anymore as far as from the draft perspective. We're talking about now. We want to win games now. I was a little bit, given that Alex Tyrou was the best key possession player in the draft, I think there's a world where North could have been a little bit more flexible in the pre-trading period to have gone, okay, maybe we can trade that pick too and we can grab Alex Tyrou and then another top end, highly talented player in that sort of middle mix if they could have traded. But they did it. I suppose if you're looking at it really closely, like they traded pick 25 for Caleb Daniel and then they traded a future first rounder for about the same pick to get Matt Whitlock. So I'm not sure if like logically on paper it makes a lot of sense, but they're definitely signalling to the fans, communicating to the fans, we want to go now, right?
Yeah, I liked it. It was bold.
You liked it?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, and Matt Whitlock's he's an unbelievably versatile player. Throughout the Coates Talent League year for Murray, he played pretty much every position on the ground, and at that level, he can even sort of operate as if you imagine like a player in the competition right now that's playing, someone like a Tim English, where he sort of acts as a bit of an extra midfielder, playing as a key position player. He played a little bit of ruck, played a little bit behind the ball, played as a forward as well, and he's a really, really good runner and a guy that for that size, like he's 200 centimetres, he can get the ball on the outside as well. He can accumulate 15, 20, 25 touches in a game, which is pretty impressive. And one of the things that North fans would have seen throughout the pre-season was just how good his kicking is. There was a few times he got the ball sort of around that 50 arc and he was able to actually compose himself, hit targets inside forward 50 and then what he's going to do from a contested marking point of view as well is unbelievable. So I think he's a great player. Is he ready to play and actually help us in 2025? Probably not, because not many 18-year-olds can come in as 200-centimetre key position players and actually have an impact. But I think for the future, we've got a really good player there.
And then what about Urquhart?
Yeah, Urquhart's a bit of a different one, and interesting in the sense that North have so much midfield depth and how they're going to balance out this team. We've got absolute gun players like LDU, we've got Sheasel, McKercher, like Phillips is there, Tom Powell. So there's so much depth already in that midfield. But I think what they've done with Urquhart is draft a player that sort of gives you that defensive stability in its stoppages. And it's probably a player that we don't specifically have. Luke Parker can probably play that role, but he's over 30. He's going to be phased out of the team at some point as well. So think of Urquhart as probably, if you're looking at another team, he's someone like a James Rowbottom for Sydney, where you've got like Heaney and Warner as these really offensively threatening players. And then he's going to be just there playing on the opposition's best player. Good tackle numbers, he's got good speed, good endurance. But if there's one flaw about Luke Urquhart that people talked about all through the season, it's he's not that good on the ball. So with ball in hand for himself, you probably, you don't want him getting too many touches.
So it's more of that like tagger role potentially.
It's not necessarily that you would use him as a hard tagging player, but definitely someone that runs with an opposition at stoppages and then tries to, get on the ball. Like, he can still win contested possessions at stoppage, but he'll be farming it out to the likes of Sheasel, McKercher, not necessarily being the one that's driving us forward.
I remember listening to Angus Brayshaw speak about his role in the 2021 grand final, and I promise I've got a point here to this, but he, for so long, he was a high draft pick. I think a lot of hope was hinged on him and what he could do to push the D's forward, and he said that in 2021 he moved on to the wing, and his role evolved from being the guy to being the one who helps the guys shine. They've got Petrarcas and they've got the Olivers, and guys like them need the hard workers like a Brayshaw or like a Langdon on the other wing to help them do the flashy stuff. And it's about playing a role, and it's a team game at the end of the day. So I think when I look at even going back to the conversation about a Tucker or a McDonald, and it's like, what are these guys doing? I mean, yes, there's obviously deficiencies in their game, which we've all spoken about and we all know, but they also need to be the ones doing the hard work to allow the good guys to step up and actually do what they need to do for us.
And I think clubs are getting a little bit smarter with that too, with their drafting. So they're not just, you look at those players that are taken after about the top 20 or 30 now, and teams are really identifying players that can do those sorts of jobs. Like, I think about the perfect sort of player like that. Like, they're almost system players, like Mark Blitzarves for the Cats. He wasn't even a footballer, right? He was more of like an athletic type, but they identified that he had the skill set to be able to come in, play a variety of roles, be able to play on the opposition's best player. And I think you can kind of see Luke Urquhart as that sort of player, like a water polo background. So he's a very good athlete, first and foremost. He could play on a Nick Dacos, for example, and shut him down. And I think like that's overall. Maybe when you talk about those players like Luke McDonald, back when they were being drafted, they were probably the next best just footballers. But now clubs are looking at it a little bit more broadly, I would say.
The last pick in the 2024 draft for North was very romantic, nostalgic pick, River Stevens, son of club legend Anthony. He actually looked quite good. I watched him a little bit over the preseason training. He's got a really great tank on him. He's clearly got really good endurance and good speed. He was a standout in some of the time trials and things like that. How do you see him fitting in, and what does he need to do to cement his spot in this side?
Yeah, I think River's a really interesting one because he wasn't a player that was like really standing out in his draft year. So there's obviously an element with River that it's like the connection to Anthony. It's a bit of a nostalgic play, but he does actually fit the mold of a player that North Melbourne actually really need right now. And I think that's probably why they ultimately made the decision to draft him. You look at our team, and I talked about it off the top with us having those real role players. We don't have those high half forwards. Particularly, we've got a few sort of deep forwards. You look at what Paul Curtis is doing, Zerha is that sort of medium type, but we don't have the guys that can kind of get up to stoppage, have that endurance, like you said about like River Stevens is a really good runner. He's really creative and nifty on the ball. I think if you could compare him to a current AFL player, just to visualise it, he's something a bit like a Dylan Moore, that kind of player. So really creative when he gets on the ball. The problem for River, again, for the 2025 season, I'm not sure he's going to have the physicality to play AFL. He's pretty small. He's under 180 centimetres, and that's probably going to be with him for the rest of his life, but he's
Yeah.
going to get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, and that's going to allow him to play that role, come up to stoppage, and actually fight with the biggest midfielders in the game. So he's another one. I think he's a 2026, 2027 sort of player, but he's definitely like, I don't think we actually have a player like River Stevens on our list, so I think that's exciting.
At the moment, you'd probably say fighting for that spot would be him potentially in a longer term or later in the year, Constanti and Robert Hansen Jr. Do you think that our decision to not go for like a Nick Watson last year in the draft is really going to come back to bite us, or do you really think that we can develop the guys on our list to get to where we need to be as a whole?
It's such a good question because historically North haven't been very good at bringing players, sort of, I guess, like rejected players from other clubs, and then being able to reinvent them. We have gone after those types of players in the past. Like, think about players like Jared Polek, sort of high draft picks that haven't worked at another club. We haven't sort of been able to get them to the next level. So that is definitely an area that I've been critical of North. Like, you don't have to take midfielders at the top end of the draft. Like, you can be a little bit more bold, take a key position player, take a Nick Watson. Hawthorn did it. So do I think it's going to hurt us? I think it probably, like, potentially already has hurt us a little bit. I think ultimately it's going to come down to what we can do with Constanti, with Robert Hansen Jr., even someone like a Tom Powell, who's sort of this like midfield depth player. Can he play like a high half forward role and reinvent himself from a midfielder into that sort of specialist position? That's going to be the question. But at least having River Stevens on the list, you've got that sort of player. So, and we've seen what happened with another father-son, Archer. He probably started off, didn't really know what was going to happen with him. Didn't look like a standout in his draft year or anything like that. And he's come on to be one of the best sort of medium, small lockdown defenders. So maybe River Stevens can do that off a flank.
I think patience is probably the key word for North fans still. I think we've been patient for quite some time, but I think in terms of individual players, maybe patience is required, but as a whole, it kind of seems like the team is looking to move in the right direction up the ladder. What do you think 2025 holds for North?
It's a tough one because we're getting better, but the rest of the competition's really getting better at the same time. I think what you're going to find this year is Richmond are going to be way off the pace and they're going to be the worst team in the competition. And then we're going to be fighting it out with those other sort of the mid-table is going to be from anywhere from about 4 to 16, it feels like this season. What did we win last year?
3 games.
3 games. My expectation is 5.
Okay.
Is that too matter of fact?
I think we need to win at least 6 games this year because I think we should have won 3 extra on the back of last year. So
the Collingwood game,
the Collingwood game, the Melbourne game, and the second West Coast game.
Yes.
We should have won all 3 of those. So in my mind, it's got to be at least 6 wins. I've got 8 as my sort of, I think that's where we'll sit.
Yeah. As far as like the teams that I think that we're better than at the moment, Richmond, West Coast, potentially St Kilda are the 3 teams. So I'd have us as what does that make us, the 15th?
Yeah.
The 15th best team in the competition. Can we pick up wins against some of those better sides? I think last year showed that for moments in games, at least, short periods in games, teams couldn't live with us. They couldn't live with that midfield. Tristan Sherry, the physicality, LDU, Sheasel on the ball, and you throw like McKercher, who's in his 2nd year now. I think that's going to continue. We need Wardlaw back. We need that physicality because that's where we bludgeoned teams last year from that midfield part of the ground. And having someone like Darling ahead of the ball, I think we're going to get
my guy,
your guy. We're going to get outmarked a lot less by those because we get smashed by intercept defenders
absolutely
a lot, and teams, they start their scoring from that source. So I think for me as a fan, as long as we show that teams struggle to play us, we're hard to play against, that's the biggest thing that I want. I want that even still now. I want that more than wins and losses.
I think for all North fans, it's just the tangible improvement we want to see. It's not necessarily going to be about where we sit on the ladder, but it could be about the win-loss. It could be about the margins. And I think it's an exciting time to be a North fan. I think it's going to be a big year. You and I will definitely be discussing North very, very regularly, both on and off air. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
For a little preview. I can't wait for the next one.
I'm excited.
Excited. We're all excited here.
Yeah. How many times did I say excited?